my kitchen. So it's that time of year when we're trying to plan how to decorate our Christmas cakes. So in this week's video tutorial, I thought I would show you how to make these really cute snowball throw-in Christmas penguins. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so what we're actually going to need to make the penguins is this black flour and modelling paste, which is by Renshaw. I've then got my different colour icings here. So this is just coloured with the Wilton Rose. I've got some here which is coloured with the Sugar Flare Extra Red. Just some normal black and some normal white and some yellow here. I've then just got some modelling tools and my craft knife, some paintbrushes, some edible tints. So I've got this dusky pink, some edible glue, and I've also got these sugar star sprinkles. If you don't have these, you can actually use granulated sugar, and we've got a rolling pin. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is make the body of the penguin. So I'm going to take some of this modelling paste. Now the reason that I'm using modelling paste or flour paste over normal icing is just because it's a bit more rigid. So as we make the penguin's body, it's not going to kind of sink down on itself as icing would. So what I'm going to do is just roll this out into a ball, and then we want to create a kind of an egg shape. Just kind of round those off a little bit, and then just flatten one of those ends onto the table just so he can stand up. So that's given me this kind of egg shape just with this slight flat bottom. What I'm going to do is create the front of him that we're going to add his face onto. So I've got some white icing here, so I'm just going to roll this out quite thinly, and once we've got that there, I'm going to take my craft knife and I've cut out a template just so you can see the shape that we want to cut out. So I've got this oval here, and then at the end you've just got these two kind of little lumps, so we're going to cut that out. Now once you've got that, we're just going to test that it's kind of the right size. So what you want is for it to come from the bottom up just before the top, so about 1 centimetre before the top of his body. So what I'm going to do is just use some edible glue and just stick that on, and then just really carefully and make sure that it's all pushed down. Okay, so to add his face on the front, first thing that I'm going to do is create his beak. Now I've got this yellow icing here. Okay, so I'm going to roll that into a ball, and then what I'm going to do is just pinch it so you get this kind of diamond shape. What I'm then going to do is chop it in half. So now that it's got a flat piece on the back, I use the back of my craft knife, and from one edge to the other, poke that in, create his mouth, and then I'm just going to pull the sides out slightly, and then again just using some edible glue, I'm going to pop that on the front of his face. Now if we go up about 1/3, I'm just going to pop it there. Okay, so now we've got his beak on there, I'm going to create his eyes. So for that I've just got some black icing here, so I'm going to create 2 little balls, and then on the palm of my hand just roll those slightly into little ovals, and then using my tool that's got the slight point on the end, just above his nose, so the same width as his beak, I'm just going to put 2 little dents in there, and then just with a tiny bit of edible glue, I'm just going to pop those in the gaps. I'm then going to use the same black icing and just roll out a length of that really thin, and then I'm going to cut 2 small sections. Just roll those out a tiny bit more, just so that each of the corners are pointed rather than blunt. And just above his eyes, I'm going to pop 2 little pieces on there, and then pick these up, pop those on, and then just with our pointed tool again, we can just round those off to create 2 little eyebrows. And then just to finish off his face, I've got some edible tint. So this one is just in the colour dusky pink. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of that on my paintbrush, and then just next to his beak, I'm just going to pop in some little pink rosy cheek. Okay, so next we're going to create some little feet for the penguin. So I'm going to take some more of the yellow icing, and I'm just going to roll out 2 small balls of that. I'm just going to push down to flatten that, and then make them thinner at one end, and take my craft knife. So we want to create sort of like 3 points. So I'm just going to cut one triangle out there, and then another triangle out there, and do the same with the other foot. I'm then going to place these under the front of the penguin. So just using some edible glue, a little bit on the back, and just glue those there. So the next thing that we're going to do is actually work on his wings. Okay, so what I'm going to do for this is take some of the black modelling paste that we used for his body and just roll this out till it's about 2 millimeters in thickness. Now, what we want to do for the wing shape, I've created another template so that I can show you the shape that we're trying to create. Now, a bit like the feet, so we want a long kind of rectangle that is thinner at one end. So I'm going to cut 2 of those out. Now we've got those, what I'm going to do is just go around and just smooth them off. We have 2 there. Now what I'm going to do is take the first one, flip that over and pop some edible glue on the back, and I'm just going to stick that onto the side of his body so that it comes around the front. So I'm going to flip that over, but instead of putting edible glue all the way up, I'm just going to put it on one half. So then I'm going to stick this in exactly the same place on the other side, but instead of pushing the whole thing down, I'm actually going to turn his wing up. And I want him to hold a little snowball in his hand. So what I'm going to do is take some of my white icing and just roll out a really small ball in there. Now, instead of just putting it straight on, just as the icing is, what I'm going to do is try and make it look a little bit more like snow. So all I've got here is some sugar sprinkles. So these are just fine white sprinkles, which are very similar to granulated sugar. But what I'm going to do is just put some of those in the lid of the pot, and then with my snowball, I'm going to cover that completely with some edible glue, and then roll that around on the end of his wing, and also just against his face, because that's where the ball is going to stick onto. And then just pick that up and push that in place. Okay, so we've got our first penguin there with his snowball. Now what I want to do is create a little hat for his head. Now I'm going to do a Santa's hat. So what I've got is just some red icing and some more of that white icing. So I'm going to take the red icing and just roll that into a ball, and then just push on one end to start creating the kind of point. So I'm going to push the bottom down onto a flat surface. Then I'm going to work my fingers in, just pulling the edges of the icing out to create a kind of a cone shape. Now what I'm then going to do is just pull the pointed side down. Okay, so once we've got the shape that we're looking for, I'm just going to stick that on the top of his head, just slightly on an angle. Okay, so firstly for the trim that goes around the hat, I'm just going to take some white icing and roll that into a thin sausage shape. Now, once it's about the right thickness to go around the hat, I'm just going to push that down slightly. And then what we want to do is, we don't want it to look flat, we want it to look quite fluffy. So I'm going to take the end of my modelling tool here that just has a point on the end and just work that into the icing. So I'm just pushing against the icing from the side and from the top, just making dents and pushing it around. So what I'm going to do is just cut it off at one end, and then picking the side to start with. So I'm just going to tuck that in there and just wrap that around edge of the hat, making sure we go all around the back. I'm just going to trim that off, and then there we have the trim of his hat. So I'm going to take some more of that white icing and just create a very small ball, and then using this tool, so this has just got a point on the end, I'm going to push that ball onto there, and then using the pointed tool, I'm going to do exactly the same as I did to the fur around the front. I'm going to take it off of there, and as you can see, we've got this small little hole. So I'm just going to pop some edible glue in there, and then this is just going to fit on top end of the hat. Okay, so there we have our first penguin. Now I actually want 2 penguins for this cake. Okay, so I've created another penguin, and as you can see, I've stopped just before I add the arms and the feet. So for this one, I've got the feet here, and what I'm gonna do is put the first one on exactly the same. So I'm gonna put some edible glue onto the bottom and just stick that to the bottom there. Now I want this one to look like it's about to throw a snowball. So she has actually just lifted up her foot. So I'm gonna put some edible glue on the whole of the back of that, and then I'm actually just gonna stick that to the front. The next thing I'm gonna do is work on her wings. Now I've got 2 wings here, which I've just cut out from exactly the same template that I used before, and just push that onto her body. And then for the second one, I actually want her to be holding this up in the air. So I'm gonna just put a small amount of edible glue at the end of one side, pop that on facing upwards, and then just pull that back, create her little wing there. Now I'm gonna make another snowball in exactly the same way that I did before. And then dusting off any excess of the sprinkles, I'm just gonna add a big lump of edible glue onto the back of that and stick that onto her wing. And there she looks like she's just about to throw it. Now, instead of putting a hat on her head, I actually want to put some earmuffs. So I've got some pink icing here, and I'm just going to take 2 small lumps and just roll those out. I'm then going to flatten them down, and I want these to be quite fluffy. So with the spiky tool, I'm just going to push that all the way around. And once they are looking quite similar, I'm going to pop some edible glue onto the back of those and just stick those side of her head. And then I'm just going to create a strap to go over the top. So I'm going to roll out a really thin piece of the pink icing, cut a thin strip, which I'm just going to trim off each end. And then I'm just going to pop a strip of edible glue and then just trim off. And there we have her earmuffs. Okay, so there we have our 2 penguins. Now you can either pop these straight on your cake, or I'm just going to use a drum board that I've got here and decorate this. So I'm going to roll out some white icing and just make this look quite snowy for them to sit on. I'm going to bring my drum board back in and just cover that with a little bit of water, which is going to make the icing stick. Now I'm going to lay my icing over the top, but I don't actually want it to be flat. So I'm going to lay it in kind of lumps around the side. So I'm just going to pull it up, pull it about. Now I want to leave enough space in the middle that my penguins are going to sit flat. And then once I've got it looking a bit like snow, I'm just going to push the edges down, and then using my craft knife, I'm just going to run this around. Now I want my scene to look quite snowy, so I'm actually going to use some edible glue and just run this over the top of those mounds. And then using those sprinkles that we had before, I'm just going to dust those and then just tip those off. And we've got this really pretty kind of snow effect. I'm going to finish that off with just some white ribbon here so that you can't see any of that silver. I'm then going to bring my penguins back in. So we've got the first one that's got his Christmas hat, and pop him on there. And then the second one who is about to throw a snowball at him. And then all I've done to finish off is create some more snowballs, exactly the same way as I did with the ones that they're holding. And I'm just gonna position those on the board and glue it all down with some more edible glue. So there we have our penguin cake toppers. I really hope you've enjoyed this video and have enjoyed watching me make these Christmas penguins. If you have, then don't forget to give this video a like. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, then don't forget to subscribe.